Great, thanks, Josh. Thanks everybody for joining us. My name is Meredith Harris with the Marlborough Economic Development Corporation, and really excited to have you all joining us here tonight for the second meeting of the stakeholders for Donald Lynch Boulevard. Special thank you and welcome to all the city councilors that have joined us tonight, and Mayor Vigent that's also listening in. So I'm going to kind of turn it over to Josh pretty quickly, but hope everybody had a chance to review the materials that were sent out ahead of time. Josh is going to walk through them and kind of give us some of the thought process behind where we're going with this project. But we really want to encourage folks to speak up, let us know, give us your feedback. This is the time for us to really make some changes and give a good recommendation to the city council moving forward. So thanks, Josh. I'll turn it over to you, and just thank you again, everybody, for joining us tonight.
Great, thank you, Meredith, and thank you again, everyone, for joining us. We're very pleased to be here. My name is Josh Fiala. I'm a principal planner at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, MAPC, the regional planning agency that serves Marlborough and the 100 neighbors you have within the 495 belt. I'm joined with me this evening with an intern from our land use department, Russell Wong. He's here with us and has been helping some on this project, so we're happy to have him with us too. So we're going to do a little more informal format. If you joined us at the first meeting, we had used a poll everywhere technology, which wasn't warmly received, I think, by the group. So we're going to just invite you all to ask questions or use the chat or speak with us verbally and not have as many technological barriers between us this evening. So please feel free to chime in if you feel the need. This meeting is being recorded, so just make sure everyone is aware of that. We will post the recording, make it available to Meredith and the MEDC, and we'll get it posted with some of the other materials for people who couldn't join us live for the meeting, or they're still able to have the benefit of this information. So please do keep your audio muted unless you're speaking, just to avoid any feedback issues. If you can and you feel comfortable with it, turn your video on. It always helps to see people's faces. And then you're welcome to, as I mentioned, either put a chat in to the chat box that you have through the Zoom features, or through the participants panel. You can also use the raise your hand function, which allows us to see a little easier if you would like to make a comment or have a question. So please feel free to use those Zoom features. So we have, I'll give a brief recap since most of you have maybe seen the materials already, but wanted to give a verbal overview of where we think this is all headed and outline how it might translate to zoning recommendations this evening, and then get your feedback about additional things you'd like to see or things you might think are headed in the right direction or in the wrong direction. So this is really a conversation to help us along through this process. We will recap briefly what we heard from stakeholders, where the outline of the vision is and the recommendations that go along with it, and then can invite your feedback and discussion at the end or throughout as we go. And I've just been noted by Meredith, we'll try to keep this to about an hour. So the purpose of this process really is being led by the city and MEDC to proactively plan for the Donald Lynch Boulevard area and ensure the future success of the area. The overarching objectives are to strengthen the district as a destination, enhance its vibrancy and walkability as a district that attracts a new generation of investment and activity, and continue it as a strong source of tax revenue for the city. It is the northwestern corner of the city that you see highlighted in yellow there. It's a pretty sizable district, about 3 miles long from end to end, and includes primarily the Donald Lynch Boulevard, but also the area just south of 290 as well, and just east of I-495. So this planning effort will provide a work plan for the city in terms of zoning recommendations, hopefully enabling future development investments on the private side of things. It is also looking at potential public realm investments that could draw the district together. All of that sort of pointed towards the direction of keeping economic vitality and activity in the district. So we're rounding the corner in terms of how this study is progressing. We will be putting together a report for the city towards the end of this spring, the end of May, beginning of June, and then be wrapping this process up with a series of conversations, likely with the Urban Affairs Committee, as we turn the corner more towards the zoning recommendations that are part of this process. And this is, just to note, the second stakeholder and community meeting that we've had as part of this process. We do not have another one scheduled, but if it appears that there's a need for another, we could fit another in. And our study area is primarily derived from the zoning map of the city. So we're looking at the light limited industrial areas of the northwest corner of the city. It's a mix of uses today, varying from some of the institutional uses, the large acreage with the Hillside School, commercial and retail uses, of course, including office and R&D, and then retail uses and some housing on the east side of 495. There are also natural assets, the Azabet River, some conservation areas, both on the City of Marlborough side, but also on the town of Berlin side of things, and some water resources. So let's get in quickly to the stakeholder input and feedback that's framed where we're headed. So we've spoken to property owners and their representatives, businesses and tenants in the district, city councilors, MEDC and the board of MEDC, and the town of Berlin through their Economic Development Committee, and had conversations with each of those entities and invited feedback and sort of discussion around where the district should be headed. So just real quick, and not to spend too long on this if we're trying to keep it to an hour, but if people could maybe use the Zoom chat to enter in your name if you're comfortable, but at least your affiliation or how you're related to the Donald Lynch Boulevard area and the study area, that would be very helpful. We tracked that in the first meeting. It'd just be good to see if you're a property owner, if you have an address that you're associated with, or if you're a resident of the surrounding area. That would be very good to know. So as I move along, please just take the time to enter that in for us. We won't do it verbally, so we'll just keep moving along. So here's a sample of the quotes and feedback that we've heard from stakeholders, that the district is lacking a consistent vibe or identity, that it has some very solid destinations in the Solomon Pond Mall and New England Sports Center, but there's not sort of glue tying the area together, that the existing zoning is limiting the property owner's flexibility. It's nice to have the retail amenities that exist, but there could be some other options that would be available potentially for lunch for the office workers and things of that nature. And that there's a lack of walkability and amenities, and drive-throughs were mentioned a fair amount. And that all of the improvements could be positioned to enhance the experience of the current tenants that are in this area. So we have more detailed notes which are available. I think Meredith has probably shared them out to this group. But those give you more details of all the feedback and ideas that we've heard through this process and in our notes that we've taken along the way. A little more detailed compilation of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in the district. I've already touched on some of the strengths. So the key destinations of New England Sports Center and Solomon Pond Mall. There's strong existing office users, and an attraction of weekday patrons. It's regionally well positioned to take advantage both of the Boston and Worcester markets, and has excellent highway access with Route 495 and 290. And then the opportunities really are expanding the natural connections that are available there, particularly with the Azabet River and the Azabet River Trail nearby, repositioning the retail potentially to respond to the current marketplace and keep that fresh. potential collaboration with some of the new development which is occurring in the town of Berlin, just over the Azabet River, around the corner, looking at different ways to activate spaces with pop-up establishments and the like. Some of the weaknesses were mentioned by you all. So direct visibility from the highways, more direct access from the highways, lacking amenities that would help people trip chain when they visit the district, and the lack of flexibility of the zoning and high-speed traffic on Donald Lynch Boulevard particularly. And then some of the threats are related to the mystery of the current environment we're in relative to retail users, the return to the office and in-person activities. So all those things still remain to be threats and unknowns, but I think the long-term prospects for the district look quite strong. So we'll get into outlining the vision and recommendations quickly so that you all can give us some feedback on where we think we're headed and see if you agree. The draft vision statement, which we're currently working with sort of as an operational guide of the recommendations, is that in the near term, the strength and vitality of the district would be expanded by encouraging uses, activities, improvements that complement the existing assets, particularly the office assets, and that this may include support for new restaurants, food trucks, or outdoor spaces, and an expansion of the sidewalk and walking and biking network in the district to really make that a fully connected network. So those are more near-term accomplishable things that can just boost the district in terms of its current assets. In the longer term, each new investment should be viewed as an opportunity to complement the existing uses and to focus on the addition of new destinations that would draw visitors to the district and new attractions. And that overall the district would be strengthened with a number of and variety of compelling reasons to visit that would build on the New England Sports Center and the Solomon Mall and the office uses and expand over the years the district as a place to do working, shopping, playing, and living. So really diversify those uses. And that the composition of each new investment should be addressing that lack of identity and cohesion that was mentioned, so that we're looking to enhance a sense of place, identity, walkability, and in so doing, defining district nodes which feel more like compact centers of activity that are a little more intimate and walkable within that 3-mile length of area that I showed. So, and all of that is, of course, responding to the real estate market and the needs of the community. So I mean, that's a lot of, just to drill down on that language and get it a little more specific with some examples. In the near term, we think moving this area, as it is a little bit isolated from other parts of the city, in the direction of an enhanced office park type of feel, we think is one that has a lot of value. And that enhanced office park would feature retail and recreation destinations, which it already has, and that improved connections to natural resources and pedestrian amenities would help to draw all of that together. In the long term, those investments might be enhancing the sense of place with new buildings that are densifying the use of the district. Right now, it's larger buildings that are spread on larger lots. We have some ideas about how to densify that activity and reposition the existing buildings with some new investment in the public realm, but also in some additional uses as well. And then focus on some outdoor activities and connections in that pedestrian network, and then tie it all together with some additional signage and wayfinding beyond what's there today. So the recommendations which we have for zoning and public realm, which I'll outline in a little more detail, we think provide some viable and flexible opportunities toward redevelopment of properties in some cases, re-inhabitation where there might be some vacancies occurring, and then regreening. So making sure that that notion of an enhanced office park feel is brought forward through an enhanced set of landscape features that really bring that part of the identity forward with future investments. So we're thinking about this relative to that real estate market, of course, and we think that this would help connect it to some of the broader trends and contexts that we're seeing, building on the success of the district for office and R&D uses, supporting viable and complementary uses for the redevelopment of retail spaces. So there'll be some retail that continues in its current form, but there might be the need to repurpose some retail, so providing some opportunities for that. And then focusing on that sense of place. And that would be through the addition potentially of some restaurant uses that don't exist there today. And then lastly, to mention that housing, while we don't want it to, we want to introduce it as a component of this district, I do believe, because of its strength as a redevelopment component. We want to do that in sort of specific conditional circumstances and with limits, so that this doesn't convert to a housing district, but maybe in more of an office and retail district that does include some housing in the future, whereas it does not today. So drilling down on how those, how that in some ways more lofty language starts to get specific in some recommendations, we think it would be most appropriate to move toward a either new overlay district or new zoning district completely. I think at this point I'm leaning more towards an overlay district. It looks like that this would align well with that, but I'm open to discussion on that. And it would not be the entire study area that we're looking at, but it would be the area which is bound by I-495 and I-290. And there's some good reasons to do that. First off, the area in that geography is of a different character than the area that's south and east of those highways. And just in terms of the parcel characteristics, the assessed value, and the types of uses that are occurring. So you can see that a little bit on the screen, and then also in the uses on the screen now. So most of the activity is centered along Donald Lynch Boulevard. I think it would make good sense to add some of those new uses consistent with the vision I just outlined in that focused area along Donald Lynch Boulevard. And then if there is success and good reason perhaps to expand that type of mix to the other parts that we're looking at in the study area in the future, that could happen, but this would be a start basically north of 290 and west of 495. So some of the modifications that might come along with that new district, looking at potentially a reduction of the minimum lot area of 2 acres and the minimum lot frontage of 200 feet. The notion there would be to increase the density of uses that can occur to both increase the walkability and provide new opportunities for investment. And then you may need, in addition, to go along with that approach, to reduce the side yard, front yard, and rear yard setbacks, just to allow flexibility on those properties. And so we think that that sort of approach would provide opportunities for viable and flexible evolution of the properties. There's the potential, I'll show in a few diagrams, which we added after the draft presentation was sent around, that respond to the character of the properties today. And they are large properties, usually with a good supply of parking that's occurring. And so they may not be properties that are going to redevelop wholesale with a new investment, but could have smaller pieces broken from them in sort of a primary or secondary lot configuration. So I have a diagram which I think helps explain where we think this might be headed a little bit. And then by allowing that sort of situation to occur, it really is that I think the name of the game here is an increase of density of activity and buildings, which make more efficient use of the land here. And that would allow for some of the opportunities that have been raised by you all as missing, like the drive-through bank, the drive-through restaurant, or one of those uses that could occur on a corner of a property. In regard to those uses, we did go through the uses in detail and have a few recommendations for the zone. There's not too much in terms of what's allowed by right today that doesn't seem too appropriate. There's two Airports and heliports, I don't think are going to really occur here. They could stay, it's fine, but they don't need to be there. And manufacturing and warehousing, there may want to be some additional special permit type conditions that are placed on those in this overlay district, just because of their, in relation of those uses to the vision that's being outlined. That may or may not be necessary. The outdoor storage of parts or things is probably not that appropriate relative to that overall vision of where the district is headed. So that might want to move to not permitted, or again, put some additional special permit conditions on it. But other than that, the slate of uses which are currently allowed look to be appropriate. There's more movement potentially in those uses that are listed today as not permitted, and moving some of those up to a special permit circumstance where they would have, under certain conditions, the ability to move forward on certain properties. And so that would include multifamily dwelling, which would be a special permit, and really defining and crafting under what circumstances that looks appropriate for the district. Potentially things like artist studios or recording studios could be another viable use to backfill some of the spaces, as well as medical office clinics or dental clinics. And then mixed use development, similar to the multifamily, might have an appropriate place under certain conditions. And then similarly with the restaurant with drive-in or drive-through facilities, and drive-through facilities more generally, could be uses which are moved up to special permit with certain circumstances, and then allowing public recreation and conservation in light of some of the public realm and open space recommendations we're looking at. And then the other flexible, increasing flexibility on the properties would be looking at the parking requirements, and in particular, the office use requirements and the retail use requirements, and seeing if there's some reduction of those requirements, which would allow for the flexible use of a portion of the properties. And this, I think, would go hand in hand with owner's own evaluation. Owners know very well how much parking utilization is occurring on their property, and if they feel they have flexibility there for reduction of parking. And if that's the case, then they can show that in a process of either permitting or subdivision, and potentially use that property more effectively, the portion that's maybe unused parking today. And then that would go along with the application of the shared parking allowance, which is allowed today, and we could make sure that that's fine-tuned for this sort of situation. And then also making sure that design standards for the buildings, parking lots, streetscape, and circulation are pointing toward that vision that's outlined. So just to help round out these ideas with some more visuals, and then we can get into discussion of your reaction to it all. The first is what's on the screen is just thinking through the current conditions of the parcels today and the likelihood that those parcels may change. And so we're looking at existing parcel data, and for each parcel, looking at the consistent set of characteristics and features that determine whether a new investment is likely. So usually it's a vacant property, or a property which has a very low building value on it. You see those in green, or a less likely to develop property. So that might be a property which is constrained, quite small, or has a strange geometry. And then the least likely to have change occur, which is in the red, which might be a relatively new investment, or an investment just doesn't seem likely to change. It has a very high building value on the land. And then everything in pink, which is a lot of the coloration of the parcels, are parcels which are relatively well developed today and occupied by, in most cases, office uses or retail uses, but they may be uses which could support either redevelopment in the future or additional development potential due to the nature of that density situation that I'm identifying. So that's a fair amount of property, and therefore why the focus so much in terms of our recommendations. So I think it's always easier to see these things than to talk about them in words, but just an idea about how this might play out. So a 60,000 square foot office footprint in the district today. This is, looks kind of like some of the properties in the Donald Lynch Boulevard area. In this case, it's just one story. That's more to just make it a diagram that can fit well and be zoomed in on. But most of the properties are either 2 or 3 stories in terms of the office uses. And then if you do that at the current requirements of the 1 space per 250, it's roughly sort of 240 in terms of parking spaces that are shown in the diagram, and that would be required. So that, roughly fits on a property which is a little bit larger than the minimum requirements. And what we're thinking is that a portion of that property could be, if you make some of these changes. Now, of course, we're not fully working out all the parking and making sure all those utilization rates are satisfied. But just as a concept and idea, this is what we're thinking, is that you could actually work out a situation where a portion of that type of property is carved away for another use. And that another use could be a small pad building of some kind, a restaurant, or a retail space, a bank, or something else. The types of uses that people have identified are needed in the district that probably don't have a clean new site to go onto. So we're trying to create opportunities for that new investment to occur. And so this could either be, a property owner decides that they don't need a certain corner of their property. It's unused parking today. They go through the process to carve it out. And that might be a special, what I was outlining in the earlier slide, a secondary sort of parcel type, which is much smaller than the primary parcel type of say, around the current requirement of 2 acres or more as the minimum size. So this might get you much tighter in terms of like a half acre or so, which would be, between a half acre and an acre and a half property would be the size that's required for a drive-through facility, for example. And that would allow a smaller property to become a part of a larger property, or maybe a couple of larger properties that exist today. So that might be a property that an owner decides to subdivide, a property that an owner decides just to rent and have a long-term lease on a corner of it. However they want to work that out, that would be fine. But we're trying to provide an avenue for that type of viable densification and investment. Then the other thing you see in that image between the two is just the continued addition with those investments of landscaping, street trees, shade trees to really help enhance the district as a beautiful nature-based office park that is drawing people to it for a variety of reasons throughout the day and week and weekends. And so this is an example where I think there's a lot of the missing items that have been mentioned could be satisfied with a smaller footprint building and facility that gives a new destination point, but also gives some outdoor space, which can then connect to the more comprehensive network of sidewalks and trails that we're talking about. Another example, I showed some other mall examples at the last presentation, and I don't think they were that well received, but here's another mall example. And so this is the Hanover Mall down on the South Shore. It might be a little more comparable to Marlborough in terms of the market and demographics, but maybe not. But it's the size of the properties themselves are quite comparable. So you can see the two next to each other, Solomon Pond Mall and Hanover on the left, at the same scale. This is the same scale aerial. So pretty comparable properties. And the Hanover Mall is going through a redevelopment currently under construction to transform into the Hanover Crossing. And it's more of an outdoor lifestyle center transformation where the enclosed mall of the 70s is being broken apart and changed to an area which is more oriented around an outdoor space with individual users oriented around that central area. In the corner of that property, you see about the midpoint of the page in the pink are actually the introduction of multifamily housing as well, about 300 units into that property. So it's imaginable that as the Solomon Pond Mall property continues its evolution and transformation and stays viable and vital, there might be portions of that property which provide a similar opportunity where the residential could be an important part of a transformational investment. And those might occur not necessarily out towards Donald Lynch Boulevard, but in this case, maybe more oriented towards the resources of the Assabet River, and thinking about how they could be a nice sort of on the edge of the development as they show up in the Hanover crossing model here. So I just thought that was an interesting example to bring forward this evening, and another way to think about some of those use items that we just talked through. You can see them in the distance in this rendering of the Hanover crossing are the 300 housing units behind the transformation there. So a little more on the public realm as well, thinking about the missing connections on Donald Lynch Boulevard, particularly in the thick orange where no sidewalk currently exists, and then trying to unlock the Assabet as more of an accessible resource, and thinking about a network of modest open spaces which could begin to connect some of these areas and give people something to do at the lunch hour, for example, and get out for a safe walk. And these, so you can see more of the assets showing up here, and it has, I think, a transformational opportunity, provides a transformational opportunity for the district to really elevate these natural assets. It's something that a lot of places don't have, and this is something that should be taken advantage of. It also has the potential to break down this very large area into smaller walkable nodes. So you can see half-mile circles drawn there, which is about a 10-minute walk from the center point out to its edge. So if you go out for a walk on that, make small loops along the Assabet and within the district, you could think about them as 20-minute loops, 30-minute loops, or if you go for a bigger one, 40-minute loops. And that would make, I think, it tie directly to the types of walking and recreation that you might see from the office worker population that's so strong here. And some additional circulation considerations. The River Bridge in the town of Berlin is just less than a quarter mile if you think about it from its backside to the backside Solomon Pond Mall. But that, thinking about how that connection's made, we haven't gotten into those details, but it's a very achievable distance that you could connect to another population. And then similarly, the Assabet River Rail Trail, which does run much more to the east here, but it's only about a mile and a half away. And there is, what we've outlined here on this slide, is a utility corridor, which could be potentially combined with bike access in particular, that just helps to think about these regional access ways in a little bit different way. And maybe it gives you an opportunity to connect this district to it. So I know I did that sort of rapid fire and went through a lot, but just to give you all a flavor of what the thinking is here. And we'd love to hear your initial reactions and how we can improve our thinking around this and really bring forward a package of recommendations to the city that makes sense for you all. So with that, let's, I guess if you have a question or a comment, we would love to just have you, I guess, raise your hand either physically or with the feature, and then we'll recognize you and you can take it away.
Don't be bashful, folks. We want to hear from you.
I'll give it a shot. This is Kevin Hardy, and I'm a director of a school on Donald Lynch Boulevard, 295 Donald Lynch Boulevard. And I think that I'm very pleased with a lot of what I'm hearing you say. I know that our faculty, which is about 130 of them, would certainly want to be walking around regional access ways after work. I'll tell you right now, we're proximal to Target, and we're scared to death to have our staff or students walk down Donald Lynch Boulevard, even just to Target. Mm-hmm. I guess I understand the 2 lanes of the road in front of the mall, especially seasonally around the holidays, but I might recommend doing a single lane on Donald Lynch Boulevard for a lot of it to avoid that racing, and maybe use the width to build some sort of barrier and make that area more walkable. It is scary. It's drag racing territory there. We already had a car come crashing down through our property, and if kids had been outside, God forbid it was on the weekend, we would have had some serious trouble. So I just think trying to slow the cars down on Donald Lynch Boulevard would achieve a lot of what you're trying to do, and maybe a single lane in certain parts might help achieve that. I'd love to see a grocery store or like a Trader Joe's down where the at the end of Donald Lynch Boulevard, across from the bank, seems pretty optimal for a grocery store, because you can have so much access to people from all over the place coming in that part of the road. And I happen to live in Berlin, so I know we're really interested in making Berlin more walkable. And it's a beautiful town, but you can't walk on any of the roads because they're dangerous in Berlin too. So the connection to River Bridge, I think, is a really good idea.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. Other thoughts? Other just gut reactions to things you've heard too? If this,
I'll ask a question. Hi, this is Greg Feldman. I'm a developer. Is there any money been allocated or earmarked to do any of these public realm improvements? I know they haven't been finalized, but is this all meant to be part of the private developments initiative, or is Marlborough or other communities planning on trying to put some of the money in to do some of this stuff?
well, I'll provide my 2 cents, and then maybe, I don't know if Meredith, you have some thoughts too, but so we're just sort of formulating some of these concepts now. I think some of them really, do appear to have some legs, I would think, as ideas, but so I think the approach here would not to be fully dependent on private investment, but to also look and see what grant sources are available and other funds through MassWorks grants or other things. And just to think about this in terms of course, there's always priorities in any municipality that are competing for those types of funds. But to get some of these ideas onto the radar for the Donald Lynch Boulevard district, and then combine them with private investment, and to think about standards in terms of some of these zoning changes too, where if the private investment is occurring, that both of those types of investments, private and public grants and et cetera, are pulling in the same direction. And so that if there's, a connection which a private property could help make along to that imagined Azabet River Trail for the Donald Lynch Boulevard area, that they're providing that type of access and maybe the length of the sidewalk along their property or something like that. So I think it would be that type of partnership, but that my guess would be the way we're going to frame this, the recommendations would be that the city should have its eye out for potential funding sources that could come for some of these improvements too.
And the only thing I would add to that, Josh, right now we're trying to develop the roadmap. So some of those conversations clearly will be down the line, but, Josh, I think you hit the nail on the head. It would be, definitely a combination of both. And, but right now we're just trying to get the framework of what would we like that area to look like and how do we all work together to make that happen.
What about thoughts on the zoning ideas that we put forward? Do people think that these would be helpful or not headed in the right direction? Looks like Timothy Fox has his hand up.
Yes, this is Tim Fox with Simon Property Group. We're the owners of Solomon Pond Mall. Just in regard to the zoning, I think the recommendations that were included in the report, I think are spot on. I think kind of the easing the restrictions, flexibility is critical to this process. So I would kind of commend you on those suggestions. One specific area that kind of caught my attention was just in regard to parking. I believe there was a reference to a ratio of public space, which is somewhat unconventional. I would say, the kind of existing parking ratios throughout the country are by and large archaic. at least in relation to large retail centers. So maybe there's an approach where it's kind of a graduated. So it's based on retail centers of a certain size. And I'm just using this as an example. Maybe under 20,000 square feet, under 50,000 or over 50,000, over 100,000 square feet. It's maybe not necessarily a one size fits all approach. Just as a general rule, I think mall properties, and I'm not speaking for the other retail owners on the call, but mall properties generally, I think 4 per 1,000 square feet of leasable area is a pretty typical rule of thumb.
Thank you, Tim. We appreciate your feedback, and it's important.
Yes, thank you. That's great. Other thoughts? Do owners agree, if there's property owners on the call, about the potential underutilization of parking, and that may be an opportunity to densify some uses in certain cases?
I'll jump in. Paul Sincotta with New England Development. Our experience, especially in the larger retail properties, is that oftentimes they are overparked. So I would agree with Tim that the idea of through the dimensional requirements in zoning, providing more flexibility and allowing for a little bit more densification, shared parking, things like that. There are plenty of examples where you can be pointed to these days where retail uses are overparked, and when new uses can be incorporated without necessarily expanding the overall development footprint. So I think that's a big plus.
Thank you very much. That's great. Thought I saw another hand up, but I didn't see who it was. I thought I saw.
President Ossing, you unmuted. Did you have something to add?
Well, yeah, I was going to wait to see if there are any other property owners, but I'll let them think about it, I guess, for a little bit. But it's really for them, because so my concerns as a counselor, right? Sports Authority, Old Navy, now Sears. So these facilities are being challenged. So how do we, and I commend Councilors Irish and Tenera for spearheading this, to try to look at how do we help the businesses in that area survive, and what changes do we need to make that happen. And I think what we came up with through our first session, and some of the changes that Josh outlined to add for special permits to enhance the district, I think will go a long way. I apologize, I forget the individual for the school, but that development of how to get the walking trails, that will come, but we really have to set the zoning up. And I would go back to the neighborhood district on Lincoln Street. We get the zoning done, then we get the MassWorks grant. Similar, we've changed the zoning on the Wayside District, Route 20. We get a partial grant to help us with the state to redo Route 20. So this is really the first step, and all the work that we're doing now, the fruits of it are 5 to 10 years away. It's really what do we really want to see happen down there, so that the they call it the Donald Lynch Boulevard area thrives. And I agree with Josh. I would start with the core area and then be able to expand it if we think if we see it working, because then it makes it easier. Because what we don't know as a council, as a planning committee, is the development community are the ones that come up with the ideas of what they want to do with their pieces of property once we set up the guidelines to let them develop it. So the changes you've outlined, Josh, I know we've talked on it. I think they look good, but it's really the owners, the folks that own whether they're filled, partially filled, vacant. what would you see to enhance your property, and the shrinking down of the size and some of the parking, I think, is going to be excellent to attract different type of uses on those lots. Yeah, I can see, smaller 5,000-foot facilities in the front of the mall coming up if some of this were to take place, that would satisfy what we've heard from the owners, that they want a restaurant, they want drive-through capability that would get people down to the mall. So, and again, this isn't a council item. We really want that feedback from the owners and the public to see what else would they like to see down on Donald Lynch Boulevard. Thanks, Meredith.
Thank you, Councilor. So it looks like we have Kevin Duffy.
Caven,
Kevin, sorry.
very informative presentation, Josh. I really appreciate it. I actually live on Bigelow, and I'm just curious, is there a traffic study for how this affects Bigelow? Kevin Hardy, Mr. Hardy, had brought up the speed to which people drive on Donald Lynch. That's 45 mile an hour speed limit. Bigelow's 25 miles an hour in some places and 30 miles an hour. And I've been almost hit once. People have driven over my driveway, my lawn. And since COVID, which this is terrible for the business owners, the traffic has slowed down. Not as big as a deal, right? So I think everything that you brought up sounds terrific. As a resident that lives closely to it, I think that it sounds wonderful for us because we'll live close to possibly a new grocery store, new services, all of that. I'm just curious about, there's no other way to get from Route 20 to Donald Lynch but cutting through Bigelow, and how that will affect, as Tunera and is our counselor, maybe he would have more about that. So a traffic study, is there a traffic study? That's my question.
Yeah, I think the shorter term answer is that as part of our planning work, there is not a traffic study included. So that's it's not unusual. So usually to get the basic idea framework for where a district like this may head, a traffic study is not included, although we hear often in communities in terms of the pressure to do that sooner than later. But the typical model is that even after the traffic is held basically in terms of its detailed study until there is a tangible development project that can be measured in terms of the current conditions versus the proposed condition. So although it's not unheard of, the traffic study will typically occur even after the zoning changes are put in place. So in our planning study, we're trying to get our arms around what types of regulatory recommendations or sort of public investments would set the district up well for the future, as we've been talking about. And then getting those zoning changes enacted will allow some of these new opportunities. And then once a property owner acts upon that regulatory change, a traffic study would be pursued at that moment with a specific project. So that may not be a satisfactory answer, but that's the conventional approach to when traffic will be included.
Thank you.
Mario.
Hi, Josh. Thanks for putting together the study, and thanks for all the folks from Marlborough for doing this. I think it's really useful information and helpful to hear everyone's input on this. So I'm with the ownership group of 150 and 200 Donald Lynch Boulevard, and we've only been involved for a couple of years now. So our focus has been on trying to fill our buildings, commercial building, with office and R&D users. Just on the last person's call, thinking about that some more with the traffic. it had come up before about if there's a way to connect this area directly to 495. And I don't know if that's something that's even doable, but it does feel like we're a little bit segregated from the rest of the community because of that. And I think that's why there's been so much emphasis on trying to develop this area as its own community. So I don't know if there's been any more discussion on that, but I do love the ideas about the restaurants to drive throughs, just places to go and to be, and also the walking and bike trails as well. So thank you.
Yeah, so I did, that was mentioned at the last meeting too. So I did some just very high level looking into that. And my impression is that it would be pretty unlikely to have direct access off of 495. I think what I found was the regulatory constraints are typically a mile between exits on those interstates. There's less than a mile away from the nearest exit. And even the configuration potentially, if you did something that was less direct, but maybe something that connected into River Road or getting away from the major interchange with 290 is the difficulty, because that interchange is on top of the study area. And I think that would be the challenge. There's also, potential other access considerations, like maybe, and I'm just really thinking at a high level here, so don't anyone write me letters about really bad traffic ideas, but there's potential, if even thinking about enhancing the connections of the current street network that exists, but even those would be tricky. Like, just as an example, the Wheeler Hill Boulevard that goes into the residence at the Point, you could potentially maybe make that connection go through to the 290 branch that's just coming out of its highway interchange there. That would maybe give you a roundabout way to have more direct access to this network of highways. But that will come along undoubtedly with all sorts of engineering and community challenges that would be associated with something like that. But the highway access, unfortunately, it doesn't look like there's a very realistic better answer. But the one thing I do think, just to maybe pick up on that from what we've heard too, is we've also heard discussion about increasing the visibility from the highways. So access is one idea, but visibility is another. And it does appear that there might be some additional potential for better signage from the highways, or there's been discussion in the past, I think, about potential tree removal from the highways so that the businesses themselves are a little more visible, which can sometimes help with attraction of patrons. So that might be a more realistic avenue in terms of leveraging the benefit of the highway proximity.
Yeah, personally, I think that'd be great. Thank you.
We've got Quentin Hart.
Hi, everyone. Quentin Hart with McCord Development. We are also in the real estate community, although not an owner, on Donald Lynch Boulevard. I really commend the study. I think the direction is all right. I love the loops. I love a lot of the zoning changes that are proposed. One thing I wanted to suggest to the group is that we're increasingly seeing a cohabitation of uses at the companies. And what I mean by that is that we're seeing technology companies that are both developing, operating, and also building and distributing their products out of the spaces that they occupy. And that's because of 3D printing and all these other things. And if you look across, I think some of the companies that have selected Marlborough or expanded in Marlborough, you see confirmation of that, Hologic and Revance more recently. And so one of the things that I was going to suggest specifically on the zoning change is that there might be some thought behind the broad move of manufacturing to a special permit condition, because while I would say that that's, a very pure and well-founded and logical direction, manufacturing can also have a very wide range of use types. Some of it is very engaging, clean, and even dense humanity-wise, whereas the more classic view of it is more of the, dirty, high truck traffic, low head count. And so we might just think a little bit about how we kind of engage the 21st and 22nd century kind of manufacturing companies that are going to be doing, the adjacent uses to R&D and office along this boulevard, to make sure that they understand that they can come here, that they are also welcome if they are, and that there's a path to certainty if they're thinking about coming to this area or this zone.
Great, fantastic points there. And maybe it does warrant some additional thinking or even definition making within the regulations just around what maybe even splitting that as a use type, so that you have the larger, more traditional manufacturing and light industrial uses, which have their potential impacts and site conditions which may not be consistent with where we're trying to push the district. But those, as you outlined, there's an entirely different class of uses within that same broad use, which may be perfectly appropriate and help to attract the type of office and R&D user that you want to see here. So that's great. Agree. Well, anyone else as we approach our hour time here? These have all been very productive and helpful comments.
I just want to pipe in, if anybody has comments or questions and you don't feel comfortable saying it here in front of the group, happy to take any feedback via email post meeting as well.
Well, thank you, Meredith, and I will not belabor too much. So yes, we do invite you to send us comments either through Meredith's office, or you can send them directly to myself as well. I'm pretty findable on the internet at MAPC. And our work is basically, we'll be pivoting now toward pulling all this together in a report format, so that the recommendations are outlined very clearly, and we provide as much guidance and advice as we can to help the city along, both with the zoning and the other types of improvements that are being considered. And we'll be doing that over the next couple months. And then we'll have a series of meetings. We will be circling back with the same stakeholders that we've talked to previously in the process. So the MEDC board, the town of Berlin's Economic Development Committee, and then, as I mentioned, likely find ourselves before the Urban Affairs Committee and the Planning Board at some point, I would imagine, as we continue on and speak about all of these. So with that, we do invite your comments. My email address is jfiala, my last name Fiala @mapc.org, and we'd be happy to hear from you. So thank you all very much for your time this evening, and we look forward to working with you all to bring this to a conclusion.
Thank you, everybody, for joining.